Welcome back. In this video I'm going to highlight the new bandsaw from Harvey. This is the 15-inch intelligent bandsaw. Has a computer screen on it. A lot of people want to know why. It helps with a few key things at the moment, but it's built in for some future proofing. It has a dial on it so you could check your tension, which I find is the most useful thing. Today we're going to take this chunk of wood. This is a piece of walnut. If you remember, about a year ago I did a stool all sculpted for Phantom Rider boots, and this is the other half of that chunk of wood. I got this from a friend of mine, got it from a sawmill. It is about 5 inches thick, about 14 inches, and this is what's left, and I'm going to try and make a chair out of what's here. And I start by resawing it here on the Harvey bandsaw, and I'm able to resaw it. The blade that comes with it is a really nice all-around good resawing blade, and it's become a second version of my table saw. Honestly, I use it all the time. Now this is my fireball table, and this is for welding, but believe it or not, it's really great for woodworking. It's good for making some really nice joints, and you'll see how I fixture it up later with some steel wedges that I could use as clamps. And I'm just laying out the dimensions of this chair that I'm going to build. I got these dimensions off a chair that I keep in the house, and it's not actually any type of chair that resembles this in any way. It's just a big lounge chair. I just like the height and the width and where the arms are, so I took some measurements off of that. So now here I am cleaning up this wood because the frame is all going to be domino jointed, and it's important that all the mating surfaces for the glue joints are nice and flat. I am going to begin to build in some of the dynamic shape of the chair. This bar right here is going to be straight because this is going to carry the leather seat sling. So this is just a straight piece, but you'll see in just a minute I use the bandsaw to cut some diagonals through some of this wood. Now I'm making two sides that are going to be held together by steel. So I'm making both sides at the same time, just so that they're the same. And now there's a nice diagonal through that piece of wood, and I bandsaw it, the diagonal. And now you notice there I just flipped it to the opposite side. So that's the cut, and now I flipped the two table saw sides together, and now I have the bandsaw shape facing out. And just like I said a minute ago, I want to make sure all the mating surfaces. I don't have my jointer ready and available. It just got pushed into storage to make some floor space, so that was the way I did that. I just bandsawed it in half and then put the smooth cuts together, and then just did a little clean slice with the table saw to get rid of the bandsaw marks. And now this is you'll notice here, this is parts of the rear leg. Now I know some people are going to get on me because this should be one piece, and I agree, but my goal was to get everything I needed out of that one chunk of wood. And right there I'm going to domino joint that first so that when I join the rest of it, it's easier to glue together. So here on the fixture table you see how I was able to set up what otherwise would be welding fixtures so that I can clamp this odd shape by using steel wedges. And the wedges are something that I made extra. You can find them if you know a steam fitter. It's a common practice if you have a steam fitter friend in the family to get those wedges. They actually come in real handy, but I made those. I just sliced them on the bandsaw. Now here I am just making sure I double domino every joint from top and bottom, and I needed a bigger hammer. And here you see I'm just doing a dry fit. And now here I am, I'm using my Type Bond 3, which is my favorite glue, dries dark, especially with walnut. I'm getting some glue on those dominoes and banging them in place. And now here, with the wedges, my steel wedges, I'm able to get that clamped up nice and tight. And if you didn't know, Izzy Swan, friend of the world, Izzy Swan, started a new tool company, Swan Tools, and this is combination square and little woodchucks from my friend Nick Offerman. His book is out, so go look for that. Now here is both the rear legs are glued up. I got rid of the jigging on the table just to make some more surface work surface. And now it's time to domino joint the rest of the frame. I domino joint every single side, top and bottom. So I domino the first surface, piece it all together, get it snug, and then mark my other side everywhere. Take it apart and domino joint the second side. There's probably multiple ways of doing what I just did, but that's how I do it. And now I'm domino joining the other side, just in super fast forward. So now everything will have 2 dominoes. Every joint will have 2 dominoes in it. Now I got to remember when I start sculpting not to cut into the dominoes. So I try to make them somewhat close together. Now here you see my 2 sides just standing on top of the steel table. They're all just friction fit except for that one back leg. Everything is just dry fit together. And now it's time to start bandsaw sculpting. But I changed the blade. I went from the 1/2-inch blade that the saw comes with to this 1/4-inch blade that I got on Amazon, but I got it from Timberwolf, which is my favorite saw blade company. I typically call them in order. It's Suffolk Machinery or Timberwolf Blades in Long Island. And I've been buying blades from them since I was in high school, and that is the truth. They weren't always called Timberwolf Blades. They used to just be Suffolk Machinery out in Long Island, and then they branded themselves Timberwolf Blades. Now here, since it's a new blade, I'm checking my blade tension. You'll notice right there. And I get my blade tension in. That's always the biggest problem when anybody asks me about bandsaws. They say, blade tension, how do I know when? And for me, it's always been a feeling. But now here you see I've given myself enough material to be able to cut in and smooth all those joints. I'm going to first start by bandsawing away some of the material that I know I won't need. And then I'll get into my signature bandsaw sculpting. Now a lot of people compare me to Sam Maloof, which it's an honor. I'm not gonna say that as an insult. I'm very honored to be compared to Sam Maloof, but I learned all this just completely on my own. I didn't know who Sam Maloof was until I really kind of got into YouTube. And there's no doubt he deserves all the respect he deserves, but I learned this just playing as a kid on the bandsaw. So I never saw anybody do this when I was a kid. I was the only person I knew that would do this. And so this is where it comes in handy. I'm able to sculpt this. This is obviously a mid-century modern style chair. There's no doubt I'm inspired by that. And here I'm able to get closer to where I want to go just by bandsawing it. And there's no doubt you can get yourself cornered here if you're not careful. You could certainly cut too much away, and then you have to deal with it. You just have to go with the flow. So up close, the finished part has a couple of little dimples in it. I tried my best with hand planes and spoke shaves to get rid of any of the bandsaw cuts that were too deep. So now here I'm taking apart the second side, and I don't show exactly everything, but here I slowed it down a little bit so you can kind of see where I was going. And that 1/4-inch blade gives me a little bit more room to work with. It's also nice sculpting with a big fat blade because you get nice straight cuts with the back fin of that blade, but there are some more small curves that I wanted to be able to attack with this. Now this is the back leg. It's a little bit more difficult because it's longer, but I'm able to get those sweeping curves all the way down. And then every leg post gets tapered on all 4 sides, and also the uprights that carry the seat back. That also gets tapered from every direction. And now I knew I had this spoke shave, and I'll show you that in a minute. So I wanted to start with that. But here I'm gluing up everything again with Type-On 3. I like Type-On 3 because it dries dark. And it's waterproof in case this thing ever gets left outside, which in my life is not so far from a possibility. But you could see how I jigged up the table again so that I'm just using wedges to get all the key joints pressed together tightly. And now it's time to take it out, and I just bang all the wedges out. And there's my first side, and then I get ready to glue up the second side. And I gave myself plenty of room at each one of those joints to be able to go in later and sculpt with some of the rotary tools that I use. And you'll see I use a combination of a few different things. Right here I started off with, this is a brand new tool to me. This is Arbortech. I don't know what the actual name or model of this tool is. I'll try and find it and I'll put it in the notes. And I'm able to start to blend, and that's really what we're trying to do here. That orange rubber disc, I think it's a 2-inch disc, maybe a 1.5 inch. And I have probably a 60 grit sanding pad on there. In fact, you see I switched to another tool because I used up all my sanding pads. So I had to switch to another tool. And I'm able to blend those joints. And you're going from long grain to end grain to long grain. It's a little complicated. You got to be careful. And using a draw knife here, and I'll show you the profile on that draw knife. Right there, it's a straight and a curve. I got that at a garage sale. And I sharpened it for this. using that curve really gets you moving quickly. But like I said, there's some burl in here, there's some long grain, there's some end grain. And in fact, I don't explicitly show it. I show it on my Patreon. You guys can go look at it on Patreon. This piece of wood took a shotgun blast, and the shotgun blast is right on the armrests on both sides. And this is a Shinto rasp. This really makes quick work of a lot of what I'm doing here. And it's the transitions. Now, that's the roughing in of the first one. Well, the roughing in is the bandsaw work, and all the other stuff is the second rough in, and then obviously I do a more fine rough in. Now here, this is where I ran out of sanding discs from the first one, and so here I'm using a Kutzall grinding disc, which also work really good, because like I said before, you're going from end grain to side grain to burl grain, and this really doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't treat those different grains any differently. And you got to be careful without a guard, because you get your fingers caught on the back of it, and it's no fun. In about 2 seconds, I cut my hand. Right there. I nicked the back of my finger. And I think right here, I nicked the back of my finger again. I did the thumb and then the finger in the same 3 minutes. But it's really nice because that bristly grinding thing can get in the corners. It has a nice curve on it. And I'm using some hand files. I'm using the Shinto rasp. And now it's time to go to the palm sander. And I'm just using the 80 grit paper, 60 and 80 grit. And then I work my way up to 100 grit. And this is where one of the shotgun blasts that was there, you'll notice some little tiny silver spots. Those are pellets, shotgun pellets. At first I saw them and I thought they were staples. I thought maybe this had like a tag on it from where the sawmill Anyway, I use some 4-minute epoxy from Total Boat mixed in with the sawdust from the sandpaper from the palm sander. And now here I'm blending it in. At one point you'll be able to see, you can see some silver dots in there. Those silver dots are shotgun blasts. As I kept digging into the wood, they kept showing up. And now here I just took a 21-inch sanding belt and just ripped it up off of a belt sander. And now I'm using it to blend all those facets that I made. And a combination of those long strip belts and the palm sander, I got rid of most of all the facets. And now it's time to try and work up the concept, and that is to start working on the blacksmithing. Here I got both my sides about 90%. I'll work them up some more off camera. Certainly worked up a lot of it off camera. So now I'm making a representative cross section of where the blacksmith cufflinks are going to go, or collar ties, or whatever you want to call them. So that's just basically representative of the different parts of the chair side that I'm going to need to make steel collars for. So now here I am in the blacksmith shop, and I have a piece of 3/16 by 1.5, and I left it long so that I could work my way off of it by having something to hold. First thing I want to do is texture the whole piece. Now this is my 50-pound Little Giant that I got from Andrew, my friend Andrew, and we restored it one day during a rainstorm during Maker Camp. And so here you see I textured it up on the power hammer, and now here I'm just kind of rolling it around the horn on that. And you go to school in the first one. I can't say that too many times. And this was the first one I made, and I started figuring out the awkwardness of trying to wrap this around the mandrel. And then I remembered I had this other mandrel that was hanging in the rafters in the blacksmith shop. I eventually bring it down. But this is why I had that piece of wood, so that I could use it as a representative. And I knew if I was too tight, I can cut a piece out, and if I was too small, I can add a piece. And you'll see what I mean in a minute when I start applying these collars to the chair. Again, that's my representative piece of wood, and each time I got close, I cut it off, and then I threw it back in the forge, and then I started working up the collars. And I thought I was going to open them up like a chain link and then bang them around the wood, but then I realized, what if I'm too long? I got to open it up again, or try and grind it on the wood while it's wrapped around. It's complicated. I'm going to be banging the wood up. And so it was sometime during the blacksmithing that I realized all I simply have to do, get my collars close, and then take them back inside, cut them completely in half on the bandsaw, and then begin to work them around the wood in 2 pieces. And instead of just trying to weld one side after I forcibly hammer it around it, I could weld both sides just as easily, and I could be less disruptive on the wood itself. Now here, this is me implementing that concept. I just took the cuff, cut it in half, get rid of all the slag on it. That's all the oxidation from the forging process. And now here you see I already did one off camera. This one I needed to fix to get it to stick on a little bit, but this is why doing it in 2 pieces was a better option. Instead of just trying to force it around, that wood would not have taken being banged on very easily if I was going to just bend it around it. But now I create the illusion that it was bent around it, but it gets welded in place. So I set all 4 collars up. These are going to be the ties that hold the left and the right side together. Now, at this point, I was still hoping I would only need these 2 on the seat and 1 on the backrest. I knew that I might need some cross bracing, possibly, but it wasn't until I did everything that I was going to make that decision. Now, these are the ones that slip down over the top, so I want to make sure that those are more manipulatable. So I'm able to weld those into one solid collar, take them back out to the blacksmith shop, taper them a little bit more on that mandrel that I found hanging in the rafters, and get them to fit better with just the solid collar. I didn't have to worry about cutting it open and putting it in place. And here you see I'm able to, the more I bang on that, the more it goes up the taper, which means the longer it is. And now here I am, I have my 2 pieces, and I've taken some time off camera to make sure they fit. Those are not perfectly tapered. They are tapered, but they're not perfectly round. They're oblong, so I'm able to squish them kind of into an egg shape on the anvil that's in the shop. Now everything's ready to be moved on to the next step. I got the collars in place. You'll notice that back collar, I needed to add a little piece. The top collars are in place. They're both 7 1/2 inch down from the top. And I'm ready to start my collars. The ties, these are the tie rods that are going to hold the left and right together. And just making sure I'm somewhat long enough. These are about 24 inches apart. So again, I want to texture it, and I'm texturing this cold on the power hammer. Because of the round surface, I knew it's going to take a dent easy, whereas the flat didn't take a dent easy unless it was red hot. So now I need 3 of these to start with, and I'm just shaping them on the anvil. I'm just banging them on the step, and I don't show off camera, but I'm making sure that all 3 that I need are the same curvature, just so it looks uniform. So I'm laying them on the table. So now they're ready to be welded in place. I just hold them in place. I have the chair sides fixtured 24 inches apart. They're about 25 inches apart, to be honest, because it ultimately ends up looking fairly wide, which is what I was going for. So now everything's tacked. I can take the clamps off, and now I tack that. I just tack everything so that I can then take the clamps off. Take a step back, look at everything, make sure everything's lining up. Making sure that everything's choochie. And in fact, I didn't like the way that looked. I cut it off and welded it back on off camera, but now it's in its right position. And now I go in and I put a nice fillet weld around each one of those rods, close up all the gaps that were bandsaw cuts, getting a nice fillet weld, because I then go back in there with an angle grinder with one of those discs where the sand pad rolls around the edge. I use one of those, and I get in there and I grind out all of the weld. And I didn't use any up-close camera work on this. I just felt it needed to be more of a wide shot, just the feeling I had. And thank you, A-Bomb. A-Bomb sends me his drill index a couple weeks ago, and here I am, first time I'm getting to use it. Each one of the collars gets a hole drilled in it, and then I put a screw in it. So I set the screw head, and I hand screw in a wood screw. It's a Robertson screw with a square drive, which doesn't matter because I fill it with weld anyway. But I wanted to get it to be set below the surface. So now every cuff has a screw in it, and it's still a little too wobbly. So after I weld everything, it doesn't feel strong enough. I knew I need to take an extra step, which was something I considered. So now here I'm discussing it with myself. I make 2 more collars off camera and put them on the back legs at the bottom. And I'm going to weld in some collar ties that go from the center of the back seat strut to those collars. And now I have some cross bracing. You can see I go from the middle of the back seat strut to the back leg. It's a little busier than I wanted it to look. By the time I'm done, it doesn't bother me. You know, here I am doing my test. Making sure it's strong enough, and I'm feeling very confident. That's still hot. I'm okay. There was no long-lasting damage. Now I got to blacken all the metal, and I have to be careful. I don't want to blacken the wood. Which, by the way, when I welded the wood, I didn't burn it that much. I didn't mind if I did, but it burned so little that the little burn that I did get wasn't enough to create an artistic texture, so I just sanded it off. So you will see a little bit of darkness underneath the collars, but I did not want to get any of that blackening agent on the walnut, and I was able to keep it neat. Now everything gets painted with Total Boat satin spar varnish. And now this is my first coat. This is just a building coat. At one point you'll notice that I sanded completely. I spent probably 2 hours hand sanding the whole thing, fixing some stuff that showed up after I painted it. You walk by it once it's glossy and you start seeing some waves that I didn't really want in it. But they don't show when it's dull, they show when it's wet. And you could probably see some of them in this shot, but I did fix a lot of it after I was done letting this dry. I went back in there with a long board. So now I'm making my seat pattern, and whenever possible, I like to just make whatever I can with tape. If I'm going to make a pattern, this is just an old roll of duct tape. I hate duct tape. It leaves that residue when you stick it on stuff, so I hardly ever use it. And here I use it to make my seat pattern. And now I have a real life size seat pattern. I did one for the back, and I was able to basically regulate all those shapes. And now I need to do a test cut. And before I cut my leather, I want to cut it in cardboard. So on my Aeon laser, I just get some cardboard. Oh, hello, Derek. And here I'm on my test pieces, representative of the leather that I'm going to cut by the end of the video. Now I put them in place on the chair, and I'm able to wrap and see that they're long enough. The leather I'm going to put on is about as thick as this cardboard, maybe even a little thicker, and much more difficult to bend. And I need to make some adjustments to my pattern. You see I marker it on there. You see how that tapers around. That goes around the tapered leg at each side, which forces it to come out past the front. So I need to cut off that corner in my pattern. And it's always good to make a test cut out of some other cheap material. Now here's my piece of leather, which I don't have much of. I'm going to get exactly what I need out of this. The seat is there on the left of the screen, and that's what I throw on the laser here. After I adjusted my cuts in Illustrator, I cut my cut path is made in Illustrator. Then I bring it into Lightburn, and then I cut it on my Aeon laser. It's a 130 watt laser. I was at 5 speed at 100% power. And now that's the neck of this hide. It's like the back of the cow's neck. So you see some texture on it. Kind of looks like elephant skin right there, which I liked. And I just used a beveler to bevel off. And now with the saddle soap, I'm able to take the char off and also fill in some scratches. It's obviously going to get some texture on it from being sat on and getting beat up. Now here I'm thinking of being so clever. I made this clamp with this set of teeth on it. I was being very conscientious not to damage the leather, and I realized that I was already putting a dent in it, so I had to abandon that idea. I was kind of annoyed that I put a big dimple in the leather already, but I was able to work it out. But I came up with this idea of, let me just put, you'll notice in the pattern I was able to put the holes on the top. I didn't know why they would land on the flap underneath, so I just put them on the top so at least they were regular. And so I got this idea, let me just put wood screws right through everything, It'll give me placement for the hole through the tab, and I can work on it a little bit at a time. And here you see, I just put a couple of the key spots. There was 5 rivets on both sides, and I did the ends in the middle. So both ends in the middle of each side. So now it's held in place. The 4 holes that are exposed, I can go in there and drill and put a saddle rivet in there. And with the saddle rivet, you get the post with the cap on it, you put it through the hole, and then you put the collar on the other side. Now, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass hammering this in space, so I put my rivet setter on the end of the hammer, and I'm able to bang on it. It gives me more of an anvil in space. Whenever you can, if you got to bang on something from both sides, hold a hammer head on one side. It gives you the pushback you need. And now in fast forward motion, I do all the rest of the rivets. And you go to school on the first one. I know I sound like a broken record there, but if I had to make this again, now I know how to do this. I approached it completely different, and that wasn't the way to go. I do my same technique. I have a chunk of wood in the back to temporarily hold each one of these spots in place while I take one out and do a rivet, then move to the next hole. So there you see my pieces of wood hold in place. Now the screw gives me the opportunity to know where the hole is going to be on the flap. So I just drill right through the screw hole. Of course, I try and hold everything as tight as I can. And some cases right here, I move the hole over a little bit to get it tighter. And I was having trouble, so I think I pull it back out. Oh, no, I got it. And again, you could see now those stems along, I cut them off. And this was too hard to show on the bottom. And then you just mush over what's left. And now I'm doing the bottom, and I'm getting close to a big finale here. Now I was a little worried that the seat was going to touch the bars when you sit in it. It wasn't quite as taut as I thought it should be, and my butt is certainly touching the steel rod. And now I'm sitting here contemplating, how can I keep that from happening? Is there any way I could tighten it even though I'm already basically done? And here you just see a couple of stills of the chair. I'm very happy with this design. I already have a couple people want me to make more. So what I did is I just turned it. You'll notice both sides will turn on each one of the sides. So I turned it so it was taut up as much as possible. And then I put all these screws in it. In a second attempt, it would only be screws, maybe no rivets. And now it's tight. It's not turning on each side of the bars. So now I'm checking, and my ass is suspended in the air. It's not touching the bar. I also could feel it, but I'm just making sure how close I am. And there it is. There's the big ta-da. And then I sign it. And when I sign it and date something, that means I'm very proud of it. So I'm very proud of this design. Here it is in the leather shop. This was a great combination of sponsors and materials. Leather from Weaver Leather, steel, Lincoln Electric Welding, and Harvey bandsaw sculpting. Walnut, got from my buddy Juan. Type Bond glue, Aeon laser, Total Boat. Thank you to all my sponsors. You guys keep me in the workshop, so thank you for that. And there's something like this. There's several videos on my Patreon behind the scenes where you see me trying to problem solve as I go through. Talk about some of the intimate problems that I had. Now I like when the leather squeaks. Back's a little high, but it rests right on the back of my neck. It feels nice. And I'm also slouching in the chair. If I sat upright, my shoulders would be above the back. But it is wide and deep. And I like it like that. So thank you for watching. Go find me on Patreon. Go buy yourself a Harvey Intelligent Bandsaw. Thank you.